There's castles that are doubled up or quadrupled, but in this particular area of it.
Hey guys, welcome back. Reese and Ben here pursuing the Knightly Arts. And today in the video you guys are going to be seeing my time visiting Castle Burgruin, Brandenburg.
Check it out now.
So this gentleman here, Reinhard Schneider, is the person who looks after the castle. He was nice enough to spend the entire day with us and show us around and explain all the various parts of the castle. So the first thing we got to see in the castle was a trebuchet. So this is a replica of a trebuchet. Unfortunately, the reenactment wasn't happening at that time, so we couldn't see it in action, but nonetheless, we got to view it, and it was the first time I've ever seen one in person.
The arrows. Right. More importantly with crossbows.
Sie können nur als Pläne verwendet werden gegen Belagerung.
You retreat to.
Right.
Whereas a donjon is often a living tower, where it's a house. And that isn't really the house, because it's far too small inside. Yeah.
Und
They added the whole western castle, which is a whole nother castle, and there's a little gap in between. And then later they built the rest that way. Kind of pretty. That's something with the...
So now we make our way uphill to the castle. So the path here is actually quite steep, so if you plan to visit, expect a hike. And here we see the outer wall,
I easily won the thing,
including the tower.
They made the like the rules. They knew people. I'm not the son. Yeah. So I had something.
So this castle was built in the 13th century, and throughout the medieval and then Renaissance period it was built upon. So majority of the structure is going to be 13th century, but then there are some later elements to it as well.
So that's just a vaulted basement, and we mostly use it as a sort of a place to have a drink. But it's of course it used to be where you stored a lot of food. So food storage is a massive deal in the period, of course, because that's your refrigerator, but you only fill it once. Yeah, because it's harvest time, you fill it. That's it, and depends on what you put in it. Of course, there's some things you keep dry.
einzigartig in Thüringen.
Ja.
Gibt es kein zweites Mal.
So that's the hexagonal shape of the tower. That's the only one in Thüringen. And then of course because it has the round tower on top of it, so that's quite special. But what is particularly interesting, and it's definitely in this region, just absolutely unique, are those crenellations, because those have the V shape on the top. And you see that, in the Mediterranean, in Tyrol. But it's very specific for this period, and it's very, very unique to see that in Germany in this period, and it's the only one that has it. So it's really quite. There's a bunch of features about this castle which are really quite special. It is the largest double castle
In Thüringen.
in Thüringen.
In Thüringen.
So you see a couple more in Germany where there's castles that are doubled up or quadrupled, but in this particular area of it, it's by far the largest.
Vielleicht noch eins, man hat diese Zinnen auch genannt Ghibellinen-Zinnen. Das waren die Kaisertreuen in Italien.
Ghibelline.
So here's a tower, and up in the tower there is a bit of a museum. So here we see inside the tower, which is a little bit of a museum. So a couple really important battles and sieges happened here during the 16th century. So most of these items are going to be reflecting that battle. So we see a reproduction harness in the style of something seen in the 16th century. Here is an image of an effigy of George von Rückrud, who was born in Brandenburg. A lot of the boards displayed on the walls recount his life as a knight, his education at the court of Frederick the Wise, and showcasing all the various battles he took part in during his career.
And then you have a chamber, which is just this little pot with a handle usually, and you can load those with powder separately. You usually have several, and so you have somebody, they can take a little stick and hammer down the powder. So you get from relatively little powder, you get a relatively big bang. That gets put in here, and you get the wedge gets hammered behind it. Then the actual shot goes in the front, but you can just kind of throw that in. That's fairly easy.
Yeah, right.
And then you touch it, of course, it shoots. But this means that the rate of fire of 15th century cannons is actually really high, provided you have powder and you have shot. The problem is that a lot of the time they didn't have a lot of powder and a lot of shot, so you could run out of ammunition very fast. They come in all sorts of sizes, but this is fairly common. They have words for them like serpentines and things like that. There's one in the Dutch Army Museum which looks very similar to this. There's a couple of these that is a slightly bigger bore, but it's this kind of size of gun.
Right? And then this ring, and then note it's wrapped around, right?
The barrel.
Yeah,
Right.
so, yeah,
Barrel
that's why it's called a barrel.
Yeah.
Exactly. The staves of the barrel.
Yes.
It's a work of a blacksmith.
This, and it's like, okay. Yeah, this is what it looked like before. Yeah. But the guy who made this couldn't even go up here to check because it was this was all in the border. So the person who made this model just made it from some old photographs and measurements, and
actually come here.
And considering that, he did a really good job. There's a couple of little things that are inactive, but it's pretty darn close. And every single roof comes off, and every single room is completely furnished inside this.
Wow, that's neat.
Because why not?
So one of the coolest things with the visit to the castle was I learned that Arne's manor that he owns was actually built by the lord who owned the castle at Brandenburg. You still see his coat of arms displayed in the castle, and the same coat of arms is shown in Arne's manor, still to this day. So here we see some reproductions of some arms and armor.
Yeah. I was interested in crossbows and helmets and
This is my handgun.
it's a gun and stuff. There's like a quadruple barrel one there and stuff like that. He made all of that.
That's yeah.
So there's a lot of very early attempted reproduction. So but you you got to bear in mind that, for instance, reenactment in England was already well on the way before even the wall fell, right?
Right.
There's some of these things developed very, very differently from one country to the next.
It's on.
It's very, very quiet. Something ominous, but you normally have a very good view. But you can kind of see the landscape around here. There's relatively steep hills, and they look a lot steeper from up here. And of course, you have to bear in mind there were no trees around this castle directly, originally. So you'd have a very clear shot. And also you can see the river down there, barely. But you actually see quite a few meanders from here. And crenellations. So if you're standing behind the crenellations end up being as tall as a man. But that walkway there, you can't just stand off it and span a bow, because then you things off with doors, with wooden doors, and then it's besieged. So they shoot at each other with blunt arrows, but they also actually hack the doors down. Oh, cool. And as they're doing it, they're fighting through the hole and things like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's
We did a scenario recently where we had a group, Manhattan, close to us. We did some unit fighting. We did a scenario where if you protect the gate.
Yeah.
So we're fighting with the gate. So we didn't have a gate like this. We just had wood. But looking at this now, you know, it's tall enough for axes, but like not very many.
No, it's
not like what we were doing.
Very many, but it is. Also, once you have a gate in here that you're breaking down, you have this hole, and there's somebody sticking a sword through it already. But your axe would get caught in the frame. And stuff like that.
Yeah.
And of course, this is now a ruin because this used to have a much better gate. And so we usually have one in there, so they have to first get into this particular area and then fight their way over there. But then what we ended up with is that side got captured like 10 hours before this one did.
Right.
When it's in that sense real time. It takes forever. We tried to scale the walls on the outside. And we had like this whole operation going to try and get the ladders up there without them noticing. And then we scaled from two sides whilst there was an attack going on here, so they were all drawn here and they could scale over the top.
Wow.
Stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you need to be careful because it is quite dangerous to pull down a ladder.
Oh, sure. I mean, well, I'm looking at all these rocks and stuff here. Like, when I'm sure it's, you know, we got like 20 some odd people going through here.
Yeah, it's more like a few hundred.
Okay, a few hundred, yeah. So, you know, you can really mess up your.
Yeah, and we ended up this little video of Isaac scaling that wall, and we're handing him up arrows, and he's shooting into the next bailey from the top of that wall with a bow. So yeah, we just kind of went up there and in the corner, and we got him on the wall, and yeah, that's very nice. Castle. This is the whole of it, right? The whole castle in the 13th century looked this big. That wall was the farthest. And that's the shield wall, and there would have been carrying on here, carrying on there. There's a big basement under here, so you can store food. That really only is a lookout, and the first section is that hexagonal section, and the other bit on top was built later. And then you have a gate. And then one of these things, where do they keep the horses? So once you start keeping horses, you need to keep food for the horses. You know, that goes really quickly. You need to live here with a bunch of people. So there was a house in here, probably a couple of years or something, I'm not quite sure. And yeah, it was pretty full. It's not actually a big place, and that was a count, not just anybody.
Yeah, he had some money.
Yeah, the person who lived here had some money, and this house got much bigger over hundreds of years, of course, but this was, you know, when you think of the High Middle Ages, castles. Ja, wie groß ist das eigentlich, diese Anlage von hier bis da?
2 Hektar.
Ja, ich meine von diesen, die erste Form.
Achso, die erste, also etwa sagen die Hälfte, aber ich habe es jetzt nicht gemessen.
Yeah. So the entire thing over its entire history is 2 hectares worth of space. But the actual usable space, also because it's so hilly, it feels much smaller than 2 hectares. But that is including the west and the extension to the
Etwa so
east.
150 Meter nämlich.
So the whole thing is now 150 meters, but the initial one is 50 meters. And there's no real, or at least at the moment, there's nothing to show where they had a platform or anything like that. Of course, to keep a wall like this up, you need to constantly do something about it. You know, every year there's more masonry being repaired, and all the, you know, it degrades. You need to keep the stones up and replace a couple of bits. And, so, of course, the top of it degrades the quickest, so that's the most touched. But there's no real evidence on how wide this would have been. Not much. So how do you shoot an arrow from there? You just don't. You use a crossbow. This was the original castle. So this was the first, and that's the hexagonal tower. And then they built the palace, and this came last, but this was all built in 1300. There's just a hole in the middle. And
that's what the quarry is, right?
It looks to me like there was some quarrying going on.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And of course, here's the trebuchet over here, and this is where the bank was built to protect it. And this one is quite late as well, so that's contemporary with the big moat. But that was when the Turks came. And then there's a big linden tree here that they planted afterwards when the Turks didn't end up coming. And they went like, yay, peace! So they have a big peace tree that was planted right here. After this all fell down anyway. So, but you can, this was the Countly Castle, so how big is that? You know, this is 150 meters, and this is 30. So this is, you know, this is tiny little thing for counts, not even knights.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Alright guys, that concludes the video. We really appreciate you guys watching as always. Had a lot of fun exploring the castle by Arnis. Reading through the stuff before, you kind of, you know, develop your own kind of idea of how things worked out, but seeing it in person really changed some things. So we had done, in the previous videos, we had done some group melees and did some gate scenarios, so holding them back at the gate. So now looking at the castles in person and getting an idea how much room you really have, we're going to be changing some things going forward. So a lot more narrower than we previously thought. So it's also really good to, you know, look at these existing structures to see how, you know, they were. Because if you look into it, you saw there's multiple areas where it's like funnels, choke points for people to get attacked at. So going up the hill is very, very steep, and if someone were to say go storm the castle, I was like, nah, I'm okay. So it was really hard to get up there. I imagine with, you know, 300 plus guys, that would have been really, really strategically and logistically really, really challenging. So, but yeah, so really enjoyed taking a look at the castle. Going forward, when we start exploring some more group melees and sort of unit scenarios, we're going to take those, you know, that room into account going forward. So, yeah, so I appreciate you guys watching, and we will look forward to seeing you guys next video. So take care.